Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna Yisrael, Solonomics. Welcome back to all the new subscribers. Shout out. Continue to like the video. To those who've been here, continue to like, continue to share, continue to leave your comments below. So, just a brief introduction or reintroduction. My name is Amuna. I do what I call Solonomics, which is the assessment of the self and those in and around us to try to get to the root cause of the problems that we face. This is not something new that I just started. This is something that I've been doing and sharing over the years, assessing slavery, assessing trauma in the melanated community, assessing race, all of those things. So there's a plethora of information on my channel, so feel free to browse around. But so with that said, thank you to all the new subscribers and those who have been here. And we're probably getting more because of this whole covering the R. Kelly situation. Why am I talking about it? Because I think it presents an opportunity. Some shy away from slavery, like many do. Why you keep talking about slavery? And because it's so far and so disconnected from the present, I find that it's kind of vague and shadowy for some. And so this particular trauma that the community is experiencing and seeing and hearing what the individual is being accused of, and it being so present because the person is still alive, because the witnesses are still alive, I find this as an opportunity to assess the situation to the best of our ability real time, and then pull the nuggets out of it. Because we may not possibly, we are spectators. Many of us are spectators at this point. And as I said to somebody, we don't have a judge. We don't have a courtroom. We don't have the ability to apprehend the individual. You have to leave that person to the authorities. What you can do is learn from the situation, because what good is it if we cannot learn from what we're seeing? We're going to be doomed to repeat that which we failed to learn. It's just like school. Whatever you fail to learn, you're going to be doomed to repeat. And so if you saw the last video that I put up a few days ago, feel free to share that video. Again, like I said, that information, as I'm studying and looking and just assessing from my, from my vantage point, it dropped in my spirit. And I'm like, wow. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, is the possibility of him being brain damaged. And it's a whole, I wouldn't even do it justice if I tried to piece it together, but it's a whole hypothesis based on factual information and testified behavioral patterns that leads one to believe that he suffers from more than just, like I see a lot of people saying, narcissistic personality disorder, which I speak about often, that he suffers from more than being an egomaniac. There's something else there, and there's possibly brain damage. And I kind of flesh out that theory and give you all the sources and resources to follow that on your own. I'll put the link in the box. So you might want to, not now, but, jump over there when you have an opportunity and check that out. Today, I just kind of wanted to freestyle a little bit because, it takes a lot for me to put a presentation together. And I don't have all that time in the world. But today I wanted to freestyle a little bit on learned behavioral patterns, which I see and hear a lot from the testimonies. You're not going to get gossip here. So if you're looking for gossip, this is not what it is. You're going to get an opportunity to take a different approach to what it is that you're seeing, and hopefully have informed conversations, because I know for sure, based on what I'm seeing on the internet, a video like pops up every 2 minutes, and I'm just sitting there because I'm trying to hear that someone has, an informed perspective, and I'm just like, wow. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to kind of level up. Why? Because if you only paint the face of the predator on R. Kelly, then we are missing the cues to be able to identify these same characteristics in our own lives. So you have to see how this personality, what really caused this individual to be this way, and then see how those factors play out in our everyday life. Because again, if you know anything about narcissism, I learned this through studying narcissism many years ago and getting caught up with narcissists. Okay. What happens is, if you think you have a narcissist peg, you don't understand a narcissist, because not every narcissist is going to operate the same. Based on their personality, their narcissism will manifest itself differently. There's actually something called an introverted narcissist, that they're a narcissist, but they don't appear to be a narcissist. My point is, studying these things, the issue is like studying the disease, studying the ailment is better to me than just trying to say you're pegging this one person and this is the type A personality of all things you need to know. Because when you do that and you don't realize that you're attracting these type of people into your life, you will leave that relationship, think that you're going to find better, end up in the same problem. Leave that relationship, think you're going to find better, end up in the same problem because you don't know the root cause. So that was my little beginning spiel. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about learned behavioral patterns. All of us have learned behavioral patterns. Some people have more problematic learned behavioral problems. And in his situation, we're going to go a little bit over how the behavioral patterns that he learned and was exposed to, and for the length of time that he was exposed to, on top of what I suggest is underneath that, which is the brain damage because he was exposed to certain things in vitro, then that compounds the issue. So we're looking at the possibility of brain damage. Hey, Sister Shoshana, welcome to the conversation. This one I'm freestyling. I'm not. I didn't do a presentation today because it takes a lot of time, but I'm freestyling on this one. So we're looking at the possibility of the brain damage. If you don't know what I'm talking about, like I said, check the video. And now we're going to look at the learned behavior that's layered on top of this already hard. If you think about hardware and software, the brain damage would be the hardware and the learned behavior would be the software on top of the corrupted file, if you can understand that. So let's go to learned behavior now. And so I'm coming from Khan Academy. You can look it up, period. But I was just sitting today listening to a lot of the testimonies. And I'm like, a lot of the things that he's being accused of is what I remember either him or his brother or people who know him that's saying he experienced. So learned behaviors. Habituation is a simple learned behavior in which an animal gradually stops responding to a repeated stimulus. Imprinting is a specialized form of learning that occurs during a brief period in a young animal, including humans. Ducks imprinting on their mother, and they give an example. In classical conditioning, a new stimulus is associated with a pre-existing response through repeated pairing of new and previously known stimuli. And in operating condition or operant conditioning, an animal learns to perform a behavior more or less frequently through a reward or punishment that follows the behavior. One of the things, the disturbing things that I've heard more than one person say is that he says to them, if it's a young girl, that he wants to raise her. He looks at people as projects to a certain degree, and he wants to rear her up. You like raise her like you would a pet. And so one of the persons asked me, you mean like a pet? And he's like, yes, he has this fixation with raising people as one would do an animal. And so that they will respond to his stimuli and that he can condition their behaviors to the responses that he desires. And I found that interesting. When you go back in the narrative, which I'm not going to read all of it, but I will read some of it. A lot of the deviant behavior, like I said, on top of his apparent inability to control his impulses, which will be a result of the brain damage. On top of his judgmental issues, you have this conditioning. So everybody's going first to this learned behavior. But since we already established this, we have this conditioning that in the household, the way, and one testimony, it's just his testimony, his mother is no longer here. But one of those things is, like I said, his mother, according to him, had young puppy, a long dog. So during that time, he would have known what it is to raise a pet, to do what it is that you want it to do. I found that interesting. And he says that the uncle accidentally killed the dog, and the mother was so upset because she loved the dog that the uncle had to get another dog. And he was there when the uncle involved him in disposing of the dog. Listen to this thing. The dog dies accidentally, according to the uncle, because of a peanut butter that he poisoned for rats. He calls upon Robert to help him as a young boy to cover the situation and dispose of it discreetly, and then lie about it when his mother asked, where is the dog? So you have, even if it's not in a sexual space or a sexual exploitation space, you have family members, older family members, who are willing to involve him in certain things. As we read, his mother also, he's witnessing his mother say she wants to stop this thing and wants to quit this thing, but his mother is implicating him And when he wants to have a conscience, when he wants to speak up, his mother uses the authority that she has over him. This is the conditioning in the mind to say, do as I say, even though she knows she's wrong. So we see the adults around him pushing him into spaces that challenges the conscience. And the way he's speaking is apparent that at one point he did have a conscience, and they were stifling, they were muting R. Kelly, as we hear. They were muting that voice. We also have in other spaces, again, his mother, as well as the school teachers, as well as the McLean, the school teacher, Miss McLean, who everybody's talking about. They gave him a pass where he was conscious of his learning disability. He was conscious that he didn't earn this. He didn't earn the right to be graduated from elementary school because he failed all his classes. He didn't earn the right to be in high school. That's what he felt like. Man, I'm not even supposed to be here. And because of his gift, because of his talent, they gave him a pass. So this is a learned behavior. So people are saying, oh, because it was R. Kelly, I did this and this. The victims are saying, because it was R. Kelly, I complied. That's a learned behavior. And he learned that from his environment, from the elders in his environment, who told him, your gift is going to give you a pass. Let's continue. I'm just saying, like I said, I'm freestyling today, but these are some stuff, I can't always get to do the long version. So I'm just throwing out some things. Let me see what else. Let me go back to learned behavior. So now, because he was conditioned, again, his sister, his younger brother is saying that it was the sister who molested him. So let's go over there. The younger brother's story was very detailed. And I was like, man, wow. But the conditioning is, this horrible thing is happening to you, and you have no right to speak out about it. If you do speak out about it, like many violators do, if you do speak out about it, I'm going to do X, Y, and so what are you conditioning the person to do? Is to endure wrong and hush it over. So it wasn't just one person or two people. He lived in an environment of abuse, whether it be sexually, whether it be mentally, whether it be emotionally. And then he was told, as long as you cover it over, you can continue to do your dirty deeds, essentially. Okay. Let me jump over here to some things that I found, among other things, very troubling. Hold on, sorry. How are you guys doing today? Let me just say, the learned behavior of him always popping up, because one of the chapters is coffee with 3 creams and 6 sugars. Again, one of the places that he always revisits, and people can't wrap their mind about why this dude has millions of dollars. Why does he keep going to McDonald's? Why does he keep going to McDonald's? Why does he keep going to McDonald's? He's revisiting, according to him, he has this kind of this love, this very strong, he would classify himself as a mama's boy, this very strong love and affection for his mother. And McDonald's was a place where they would go together. Before, it appears as though it was before his younger brother was born. And so this McDonald's to him represents this space that he and his mother shared. And he keeps revisiting that space. And at this time, he has perverted that space and turned it into something else. But for those who keep asking, why does the dude keep going to McDonald's? Just read Coffee with 3 Creams and 6 Sugars, and then you will see why he keeps going back to McDonald's, because it represents the familiar. I was reading about fetal alcohol syndrome and about the routine and the need for routine and the need for returning to that which is familiar. And so this is one of the things that I found to be very familiar, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the fullness of the McDonald's conversation. It does fall into the discussion of learned behavior though. Also, his mother, the desire to appease. There's stories of him lying in the like the mother said, who threw the greens on the wall? He immediately blames the brother in the story, and then both of them are held accountable. It seems as though because his father was missing, he didn't really have a respect for much, and that in his estimation, the mother was the person who was able to put him in check. And so because early on in his career, but also she's putting him in check, but she also has certain issues that he basically internalized through learned behavior, right? So women in the house, the complaint today is about him having all of these women in the house, and these women keep returning, and he wants to recreate the environment. But what he's doing is recreating the environment that he lived in, this chaotic environment in which now, because um, is he becomes the perpetrator, he's creating or recreating this environment. So this one is named Women in the House. Again, for those who just joined us, this is Unraveling R. Kelly. We're talking about learned behavior, and hopefully we don't just leave it at him. I just find this as a springboard to have a discussion about the things that we have learned from our environment, good, bad, and indifferent, and how we continue to perpetuate them. Women in the house. There were always women in our little house at 40th and King. They were cousins, aunties, friends of my aunties, and all older women. Okay. When my mother wasn't home, the women ran a little freer, meaning that when mom or my grandmother were home, they'll dress a certain way. So not only is he exposed to being molested, he's seeing women who have these double personalities. In the street, you're one way, or when other people are looking, you're one way, and when they're not looking and the authority figures are not there, then you're another way. This is conditioning the young mind of a young, impressionable boy with no masculine energy around to really guide him. It says there were always a woman in our little, okay, I read that part. They were cousins, aunties, friends of men of my aunties, all older women. When my mother wasn't home, the women ran a little freer, meaning that when my mom or grandmother were home, they dressed a certain way. When my mother and grandmother were out, they felt free to wear less clothing. You could see through their blouses. That means inappropriate. Sometimes they wore bras and sometimes they didn't. When they walked around in nightgowns or pajamas, you could see their panties. And on a few occasions, like on very hot summer days, they wouldn't even wear panties. So this is indecent exposure, okay? As a very young boy, I didn't think much of it. The women didn't really pay much attention to me or my brothers. I looked at them the way any kid would. Kids are naturally fascinated by body parts, and I was no different. As I crept up in age, though, and made my way through grammar school, I found myself more curious and sometimes aroused. And I was ashamed of being aroused. But there was no one I felt I could talk to about this. This is also another reoccurring theme with him, that when he was going through the molestation, he's going through the abuse, he's feeling the shame and anger. He doesn't feel that he can talk to anybody. He doesn't feel he can, work his way through. So according to him, he would put this in his brick box. And we know that this didn't go anywhere. All it did was went into making what we see today. I couldn't have a sit down with my mother because I wouldn't know what to say or how to say it. There was no man that I trusted enough to share such shameful feelings with. Growing up with that shame has haunted me through my life. One winter afternoon, I came back from school early when my mother wasn't home. As I came through the door, I heard a strange noise. It sounded like bed springs squeaking. The walls in our place were paper thin, and sound came through like there wasn't any walls at all. This squeaking got louder and louder. Then I heard a voice, a woman scream, but it didn't sound like a scream of a pain or panic. Then I heard a man's voice shouting, but it wasn't in anger. Oh, God, do it, get it right. Then he's talking about all of the interaction between this man and woman in intercourse while he walks in. You like it, don't you, B? Hold on one moment, please. That's why I don't want to read all of it. Hold on. All right, thank you about that. I'm back. So he walks in on this interaction, and then they're going back and forth. He said, I was 8 years old. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought the man was maybe hurting the woman, but that didn't seem right. I was confused, curious, so I went to see myself. And then essentially he talks about going to the room, looking inside. He's seeing the nudity, so he's being exposed. And then when the woman sort of saw him, she says this, "Little Robert, what you doing in here, boy?" Okay. And then he says he got scared and run, and the woman shouted, "Come on back. It's okay." They were still in the bed, both of them naked, when she said, "You can watch, but you better not say blink to nobody about this." And so that again is another learned behavior of being exposed to things that you're not supposed to, silence and secrecy, keeping it all in, okay, but yet still being drawn to it. Later on, we see all of this testimony about voyeurism, which is also, so why I say exasperated, the possibility of a brain condition has all of these qualities in it. Him actually seeing it, being voyeuristic and all those things, compounded the issue. So we have a bottom issue on the foundation, and now we have a issue of promiscuity in the household, voyeurism in the household, secrecy in the household, dualism in the household. When the mother is there, it's one thing. When the mother's not there, it's another thing. And so I wanted to give you that piece. Okay, there's more. So it wasn't just about him physically being touched, which actually also happened, but it's also about the adults. So we did say, who are we going to blame? There's a lot of people. There's enough blame to go around. Okay. Now, he talks a little bit about the uncle. This is the uncle who ends up killing the dog. And the uncle, be careful what you say to children. The uncle is talking to this little boy. He doesn't really have a father figure. You do have this masculine energy around, and this masculine energy is debased. He's watching Three's Company. And he wants to watch the Jeffersons. The uncle is watching Three's Company. He's calling the women on the Three's Company bees and talking to the little boy about threesomes and all of this type of thing. Okay, coming from an adult, which in the mind of the child, then this must be okay. You have one adult over here walking around in nudity. You have another one who's asking you later on, the same people who were engaged in this sexual act told him to take a picture of them. And to this day, he's confessed in different spaces of not being able to stop filming himself. This is where the whole sex tape issue comes out, because he can't stop filming himself. Is that a learned behavior, or is that a learned behavior plus installed on his hardware? Another learned behavior is this dualism between, I believe I can fly and feel it on your booty, right? This is what he learned. This is what he learned during childhood, 0 to 7, 7 to 14. His mother sang in nightclubs and his mother sang at church. So if the person who you love, in his estimation, in one space, he called her like his God, okay? This is what he says of his mother, how he's a mama's boy, how much he loved her. And if you're looking at your God singing in nightclubs, actually witnessing him singing in nightclubs at 5 years old, okay, and then on Sunday morning going to church, then to him, that's very normal. There's other spaces where he says, sexuality is spirituality. So this marrying the two, and people like, oh, he's a monster. Okay, how did this monster become that? Who modeled this behavior for him? Who let him try to find, when you have these two diametrically opposing thoughts, who gave him the notion that they can coexist at the same time and not cause any static within the being? His environment did. His environment did. There's another thing that I wanted to go over with the learned behavior. Oh, was this thought of using, which is a very common thought, using what it is that you have to manipulate others. And because he may not, and so many people have said he may not be very smart, his judgment is off. He knows that he can do music, and through this music, he feels that everybody wants a piece of him. Everybody wants to exploit him. So to think that the people around you only wanted the best for you. Yes, he uses it as a revolving door. Yeah, because that was what was modeled for him at a very young age. You go to the club and then you go to church. His mama, he said it was a small. I'll read it a little bit for you guys so that you can understand. Hold on one second. This is the behavior that was modeled for him, and this is the behavior and I'm gonna come back and talk, and I think I'm gonna do that one in a form. What's it called? In a presentation format, because I want to talk about when certain behaviors get caught into certain phases of our growth and development, and how it manifests once you're stuck in there. Okay, so that is what I want to, when you witness things at certain places. It's like the rings on a tree. You can tell what happened to a tree. You can tell how old the tree is. You can tell because each year, supposedly, the tree gets another ring. And so whatever happens within that space, whatever energetic, whatever energetic wise happens in that space is captured in that space and continues to manifest from that space. So I want to talk about that, but I have to kind of map that one out a little clearly. I wanted to just go to the church. So yeah, they asked him to take the Polaroid picture. He saw it again. He says, I opened the door just enough to see them kicking hard. He goes on to say that he was scared and they told him, don't move. And then they went on to tell him, take a picture. So imagine that of a young child. Okay, now you're exposing the child to real life pornography and you're actually telling the child to engage in it. Okay? So that also is stuck, and that is also something that many people. Oh, he's filming me. I see the camera there. He's obsessed with it. He takes it out of his little black bag, and he's repeating these behaviors because somebody told him along the way that this was normal. And even if you don't think it's normal, the shame of it, you just hide the shame and you do it anyway. So Sunday morning, he says, on Sundays, I would put on my freshly ironed vest, black trousers, clean white shirt, little clip-on bow tie, and follow my mom to the little storefront church where we went to sing and pray. I had to get myself ready for a long day. Church went on for 3, sometimes 4 hours. The church didn't hold more than 25 people. It was no bigger than a liquor store or pizza joint. Our pastor was Mother Nance. She had these big, brightened eyes, but was a sweet lady who was all about the Lord. She preached her sermons like songs, singing the lessons she hoped to impart to us. I want to pick a sticker pin right here. His mother was strong, according to him, and she was a lioness over her cubs, which is the 4 children. The leader of the church was a woman, another strong woman, Mother Nance, okay? He has an issue with women. And so so after women who are not strong to mirror his mother, because if they are, he would want to break them down. He goes after women he can raise, women who are moldable, so that he can make them into what he wants. Eventually, at some point, the masculine energy wants to dominate. And so because he's in a feminine space, for whatever reason, he's in this overtly feminine space. He's recreating a space where now he's in control. Remember, the feminine principle, for the most part, violated him for 7 years. You know what I'm saying? So all of these things are adding up to the behavioral patterns that we see. So now he's in control. And one of the first things that the women testify of him saying is, call me daddy, which automatically means that you are beneath me and I am in control of you. Okay. We're going to pass here. I just wanted to show the back and forth about him going to church and it being normalized. There's no difference between, quote, the world and the church. Okay. So that's another normalized behavior. I wanted to go to one about the paying, what one adult said to him. And this is not going to be very long. One adult said to him, it was a male. I'm going to show you why the mother, remember, I didn't share that part. He said he hated his mother he hated his father because his mother hated his father. Okay. And he loved his mother so much that whatever she hated, he hated. So in this case, the mother loved or liked this man because of what this particular man was doing. So this one is named Mr. Blue. On this particular morning, Mr. Blue came by and saw that I was by myself. No, wait, before I get there, let me go on. In one of the neighborhoods where we lived when I was a kid, there was a man named Mr. Blue. My mother always liked him because during the summer, he put us in his car, drive us out to the country and show us how to pick fruit. Okay, so the masculine principle comes later, but the mother's liking him because he's engaging with the children. Mr. Blue bought us skateboards and bicycles. Mr. Blue was cool. On this particular morning, Mr. Blue came by and saw that I was by myself and told me to come over to his place. Red flag, but we'll keep going. I followed him over. When we got there, he said, help yourself to the watermelon in the fridge. The melon looked good, so I helped myself to some. Meanwhile, Mr. Blue went to the bathroom and took a shower. I didn't think nothing of it. When he came out, he was wearing a robe loosely tied around the waist. As I finished my melon, he told me to come into his room. When I was a little boy, about your age, Mr. Blue recalled. Remember, he has a judgment issue. If he does have that pre-existing concern, he has a judgment issue. So, you're not really realizing. He's like, I thought nothing of it. Nothing's going on. This dude takes his picking fruit. I had my uncle, this is what he says, who paid me $1 to rub on his genitals. He says I'll say genitals. And then he says, he curses, I take the money and buy me all kinds of things. So now you have an adult male who's saying to this young child that because this adult male was groomed and raised to take money for inappropriate behavior, this adult male is now projecting onto this child that I can buy you and you can buy the things that you want if you give me what I want. At this point, Mr. Blue pulled out his genitalia and started rubbing it with grease. It looked like a monster. The last thing I wanted to do was rub it. Well, said Mr. Blue, $1 ain't what it used to be, but $5 ain't nothing to sneeze at. If I give you $5 to rub on, and then he says, before he says another word, he was running out the door with his voice trailing after me. Now, it's funny when I read this account because numerous witnesses say, yeah, the daddy was out of his life, and it seems that he was accomplishing two things with it. Come a little bit more with that, Susan. Let me hear a little bit more on that one. We can kind of develop that thought because there's so much that comes with the father figure not being there. And even though, according to his testimony, he did have Lucius, which is who the mother later on gets with, but he still doesn't accept him. He says he was cool. He was more of a brother, but not like a father figure to him. And so he was still missing that. And even when one was present, he really didn't embrace it. But yes, when he grew up now, he wants to be that authoritarian figure. He wants to be that father figure. Concerning the learned behavior from Mr. Blue, he becomes that person now. He becomes Mr. Blue. He now becomes the one, allegedly, who tells the women, come into the room, who tells the women, I'll get you this, here's a little money to do that. And then he pops out in a row. You know what I'm saying? He pops out inappropriately and flashes himself to people. But this is a learned behavior. Again, we're talking about learned behavioral patterns and where the individual was exposed to all of these things. And he was the victim. And it appears that when you have an offense, a trauma, the person either is going to become another victim or they're going to become the perpetrator. Now, if the person identifies, and that's from trauma bonding, I have the book over there. But if the person identifies with the aggressor, if they don't, then if the child, the victim, the person identifies with the aggressor, then they become the aggressor. If they identify with the victim, then they stay in that victim mentality. Yes, yes. And he actually, according to them, that would be very upfront. That would be one of the tests that he would have them to pass, that automatically, I guess this is in the later years, because those who it happened to earlier really don't have that testimony. So like they said, over the years, he perfected his manipulative game, right? But in the earlier years, the later years, the thought is that many of them say right up front, after he, lures them in a little bit, they may see him at the concert, whatever the case may be. And we're going to talk about the women too, because we can't just talk about one side and not talk about the other. There will be no buyer if there's no seller. There's no seller. If there's a seller and no buyer, then there's no goods. So for the simple fact that we have all of these stories, then somebody's buying. Somebody's buying. There's no market if no one's buying. Somebody's buying. But later on, he would frequently use this as a test, a measure of how submissive you're going to be when, he talks to them. And the first thing he says is, and by the way, call me daddy. And if they do it right away, not knowing why they do it, then he knows that he can work with them. This is according to some of the testimony. Okay. So again, we're talking about learned behavior. What are some of the learned behavioral patterns that we adopted? Who did you identify? Were you able to identify the aggressor in your life or the perpetrator? Were you able to identify the victim? Was it your mother? Was it your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, your brothers? Did you identify with the person who's getting beat up or suppressed, or did you identify with the person who was doing the suppressing? Because this has a lot to do with what you later on become. And apparently, he identified, well, the persona, because many people are saying there's two people, including his ex-wife. There's Robert Kelly, the man, and then there's R. Kelly, the persona. So it's apparent through his behavior that he went on to identify with the perps, okay? And he internalized the behavior of the perps, and he now wants to be the one who's in power and control. And so he uses, like Mr. Blue, that $5, or he uses, like some people are saying, yes, it's a quick move. Yeah, it's a quick move. He according to them now, he puts it in there real quick. Like, and by the way, call me that. You know what I'm saying? And if they do it, then all right, then we can talk. And then he begins to work his way into their psyche and into their understanding. But again, this is not, unfortunately, I think people are more willing to pay attention because it's celebrity, it's star. And I also want to talk about the idolatry in this situation. Because there's a great level of idolatrous thought process that would allow someone to willingly walk into a space that in 2018, 2008, 2019, and even 2019, because 2019, we see some people still saying, take them hostage. So there's a level of blindness that comes with this idol worship, which is what it is, because someone is a star, somebody is notable, somebody is recognizable by you, that one will sacrifice themselves to a certain degree. And that's what it is. In order to be a victim, I'll read victim before somebody start tripping and saying I'm victim blaming, which, by the way, I want to get that book. There's actually a book called, I looked it up, there's a book someone termed in the 70s, the term victim blaming, and it has more to do than what we're actually saying, okay? And so I've heard that countless times, so we're not going to go to the victim blaming, but we are going to read the definition for sacrifice and why I say some people willingly sacrifice themselves. Because if you look at the stretch of what it is that he's presented to us, I can't say that the individual hid. It wasn't like not Robin Hood, the little the wolf in what's the name of that story? But he put on the Little Red Riding Hood. You know what I'm saying? He didn't necessarily put on the little cloak and you couldn't see him. Like, he was out in the open showing you that this individual is conflicted. That this is what the individual is going to want from you. He displayed it all throughout, because as we read with the possible brain damage, this is how they convey their message. This is how they communicate if they're artistically inclined, which, by the way, his mother was artistically inclined, I believe his uncles and his grandparents. So not only would this possible brain damage contribute, it was also within the bloodline. So it took him, all of the things for him was exponential. The abuse was exponential and the musical ability was exponential. If you can, and we don't know who the father is and whether or not if he was musically inclined. Okay. Okay, so there people say he's a superstar, he's like a god. So sacrifice, an act of slaughtering an animal or person or surrendering a possession, yourself, your body, your soul, as an offering. It was because it was R. Kelly. It was because he told me to do it. It was because I couldn't refuse, because in your mind, he's elevated. He's this idol. He's this God. So, or surrendering a possession as an offering to a deity or to a divine or supernatural figure. So when I say some of these women offered up themselves as a sacrifice, they surrendered possession of their bodies, of their souls, to be into the presence, to interface with who society, the music industry, the popular culture has deemed the king of R&B, this deity, this divinity, this demigod. I let that marinate for a second. Let that, you understand? So this goes beyond just saying on one side. Right now we're looking at his side of it. However, there are other sides that we need to consider, because again, this is not a one-off situation. Okay, so I read Mr. Blue. I read the conflicted learned behavior from the vacillating between the church and the club. I don't want to go too long today. I just wanted to bring out those. Those are some things that are off the brain. Oh, also, some people talk about him using food as a reward, or food as something to punish those who are not in his good graces. One of the women said that she would starve for 3 days. Another one would say for 2 days. She was so hungry. If you don't do what it is that he says, then he starves you. He withholds food. Again, this is a tool and mechanism, again, in learned behavior, in socializing animals and people, okay, that you reward them with one thing or another. And according to the brother's testimony, if I remember correctly, this was a learned behavior from the sister. When the mother wasn't there, the women did act differently. And one of those women, according to the brother, is the sister. And the sister would, punish them, lock them in the house. This is what, that's what I wanted to remember. This is what he's doing to the girls. The sister, then he would molest them, exploit them, in private so that others wouldn't see. So the brother testified that he never saw him getting molested and vice versa, but they knew that it was happening. And the sister is the one who modeled this type of behavior in plain sight. So there's a lot of people who used to work with him saying that I never personally saw him do it, but I knew it was going on. Because when he was doing his dirty deeds, he was doing it in private, but the people were kind of aware that something was off. So it is the case with the sister. And I find it hard to believe, very difficult, that for 7 years, this is happening. And the mother or the adult figures, at one point his grandmother was living around him, that no one was able to see that something is different. Something is going on here. You know what I'm saying? 7 years, that's a very long time to be abused and hold that. So now that has become a part of who that person is. Any questions, feel free to ask. Yes, so he's using food as a grooming mechanism, as teaching them this reward-based system. If you don't go against me, if you don't buck the system, if you let me do what I want to do to you, Mr. Blue taught him that. His sister taught him that, and whoever knows who else taught him that, right? If you do what I want you to do, then you will be rewarded. And if you don't, then I'm going to come after you. And so this is this very fear, this very real fear that you have. So he isolates, essentially, the learned behavior is to isolate the people in the same way in which you were isolated. So because you felt isolated and alone and broken and sad and hurt, hey, due process, welcome. Yeah, you're gonna probably have to go do the replay. And it's funny you got due process because I was really meditating on that term today. That's funny. I was really meditating on that term. Because in this popular culture, that's something that we are not seeing in this YouTube press play, no publishing, no thinking about something, just blogging, is the lack of due process, where we are actually taking the time to first assess all of the things and then come to a conclusion. We seem to, and I'm reading a lot of these comments, project our pre-existing issues on the situation. This is why we need to talk about it, because it's easier to talk about it when it's R. Kelly, because it's like one person removed. So you can get mad at Uncle Rufus, you can get mad at the babysitter, you can get mad at the math teacher, you can put all of that venom and indifference that you never received justice for, you can project it on this individual and then feel vindicated in doing so. Because maybe at some point you didn't own your own truth, or you didn't process your own injury. And so we come jaded to a certain degree to this conversation and put things like, I listen to some people and I'm like, they didn't say that, and they're like, you're defending. I'm like, no, but that didn't just happen. They didn't say that's what happened. Why are you saying that's what happened? Because we all hear different things. That's another thing I'm talking about. And I have videos up here as well as in other spaces where we all process things different, depending on what's already in our software, right? In our memories, in our thoughts, in our learned behavior, we hear things differently. And so if we don't clear out our cookies or our junk files, right, it slows down the process of listening actively and comprehending that which we are hearing, right? And so this is what we're seeing a lot of, and it makes for good entertainment, but it doesn't make for good resolution. Okay. And so if somebody wants to be entertained, well, maybe they'll be entertained by that. But if you want resolution, if you want some type of understanding, if you want to be informed, then that's going to take some patience. That's going to take some time. That's going to take some stepping back from the situation and being able to look at it for what it is and for what they're saying. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like I said, I will come back and speak about in general, but using this case as a case study, the ways in which we are injured and how they affect us physically, mentally, and emotionally at each stage. So I will leave you with this leading up to the next part is essentially when you look at 0 to 7, and I'm talking about the software, right? When you look at 0 to 7 of the developmental phase of a child, there are a lot of things that are going on there, okay? And when injury occurs in this space, physical injury, emotional trauma, all of these things, then you get different results than you would have if injury did not occur. And one of the things I saw about fetal alcohol syndrome and those who are born with it is that they need stability in their environment. And if you don't have stability in your environment, again, it makes sense, it would exasperate the situation. If they witness domestic violence, which was in the environment, if they witness abuse, it makes it worse. So imagine a child who doesn't have a pre-existing condition witnessing this, and then imagine a child who does have a pre-existing condition witnessing this. It's very powerful. The effect that it has is long reaching, and because you're not diagnosed or you don't know what's really wrong with you and you don't know how to put your finger on it, it's even more troubling. Okay. Asu said it seems like he's repaying everybody, but also appropriating their promiscuity, power, and punishment. Yeah, this is what it appears to be. Because what I said is when I saw the book, I said, he did a lot of the work already. Meaning the recalling, the work. When you talk about when Ilana said that he didn't fit the criteria for her show, he may not have fit the criteria for her show, but more than most, when you're reading the blueprint, which is his book, this is how I was able to hypothesize that he may have had a brain injury based on what he shared and based on the behavioral patterns of his mother. Okay. And so when you see that he did a lot of the recalling, that means and it doesn't seem, it may be not 100%, but he was able to give us the rundown of the places of injury. And when you go back and look, when he accentuates a certain part, that means look at this, right? And so when we do it for ourselves, I've done it for myself since I was 25. I started writing my own narrative, okay, because I wanted, and I found that to be very helpful because it causes you to rewind the tape. It causes you to look from the child's perspective, because a lot of the things we were remembering, now let's get to us, okay? Because this is a conversation that gets us to a place. When we experience things as children, we are looking from the 12-year-old's perspective, the 6-year-old's perspective, the 4-year-old's perspective. Say you're at the table, this is your eyes over the table. You can't see everything over the table. You're just remembering it as a child would. This thought, this emotion gets crystallized in the 5-year-old in us, the 2-year-old in us, the 12-year-old in us. And as we grow, if we never deal with it, we still relate with this information, this data, this memory from that perspective. Now, the problem with that is it doesn't allow for healing. So when we get older and we are moved to write our own memoir or journal or recall things, it gives us an opportunity now to process it with updated software. For instance, on this computer, if I have an outdated YouTube flash thing, they will say YouTube program could not run. Please update your computer, right? Anybody who's on your computer, you're on your computer now. Don't you have a computer? If you have an older computer, you're running an older version of Word, you're on an older version of YouTube, older version, they will say, what? On your app, update this app. Why? Because the app needs to be updated in order to process the information. So I like to use computers as an analogy because we're in a computer age, and you understand what I'm saying? So I'm talking about childhood and these crystallized thoughts. When we get to this space, we have to update our app. We have to update our process of how we are looking at this information. We can't continue to relate to it from the perspective that it actually happened. So one of the things you do is write it down. One of the things you do is begin to ask those who were older than you about their perspective on what you perceive to have happened. Because everybody has a perspective. This is why something could go down a crime and you have to have a whole court case to find out what really happened, because you're coming from different perspectives. I'm talking about growth and development now. I'm talking about Solonomics. So the fact that Robert Kelly wrote this down, it gives a timeline to look at, and injury spaces to look at, and places that were stuck out in the person's mind, and unresolved spaces to say, okay, cool. I see what's going on here. But a lot of us don't even take the time to do that for ourselves. And I'm telling you, it can change your life. If you have parents who are still alive, or grandparents are still alive, or uncles and aunts who are still alive, who you can go to and say, hey, do you remember, because this is if you're trying to understand what's going on with you. Do you remember when I was born? Or do you remember what condition your mind was in? Or do you remember, or just tell me the story? I went to my grandmother. Most I bless her, she's 90 something now. She's the last of the Mohicans of that generation, my father's mother. And I just asked her about her life. Some of our foreparents don't want to talk, but if you catch her at the right time, her memory for a 90-plus-year-old is sharp. She remembers Jamaica. She remembers streets. She remembers I'm like, dang, you better than me, grandma. I don't remember. You know what I'm saying? She remembers all that stuff. Her mind is sharp. I ain't even gonna front. But she will recall circumstances and situations that's before my father was born. And what that gives me is a panoramic view of when you come into the scene, when you come into the picture, when you come into the show, what was the environment that surrounded you? What was, like they say, what was in the birth water? I went to my father. I went to my mother. I'm asking questions. What was in the birth water? And for me personally, a lot was in my birth water. It was turbulent times in my birth water. Okay. And so I came out a fighter. You know what I mean? I came out a fighter because that was the energy that I needed, because I was going to be in this environment that if I wasn't sure about myself, I had nothing but masculine energy around me. And so if I didn't come out in a certain way, you know what I mean? I would just be like all crippled up and stuff. So, but that was me. So it's important to find out what's in our birth water. If our parents, most I forbid, has passed on, and you can't get to that, I don't suggest people doing any weird type of stuff, man. I see some weird stuff on YouTube. Can I have a moment? Can I have a moment? I'm coming through process. In this research, I'm like, you know what, people? This is also part of the problem. Why are people? I'll leave that for another day. Let me just say, I see some weird stuff happening on YouTube for people trying to get information, which is unnecessary. If your heart is pure and you're clean and in the right space, you will understand what it is you need to understand. When you break, I'll say this about crossing spiritual boundaries to yourself to get information. That is opening up doors from the physical realm to the spiritual realm that you don't always have the capacity to close. So I don't know who and why one would want to know so much about an individual that they're willing to cross that veil and cross that boundary just so that they can make a YouTube video and talk about they're talking to the souls of that. I'm going to read Due Process. Yes, I discovered so much through my elders. It helped me forgive my mother's wrongs towards me by understanding her upbringing and lack thereof. Due Process. Thank you so much. This is what it can do. So when you have the opportunity, nobody's promised tomorrow. When you have the opportunity and you grow to the space where when people say, I forgive, I release. When you release that thought of, they did it to me with intention, it's because they didn't like me and because they hated me. When you release that thought and be willing to see that your parents were human. Your parents were human. And a lot of times our parents had us when they were children. You see what I'm saying? And so it's this cycle of just survival. This is where we are at this very base level of survival that we don't see beyond to how our possible emotional abuse or exploitation of our children can affect them and have these long reaches effect, right? So there's so many things to consider. And the people say, you're giving them a pass. No, you're not giving them a pass. You're allowing yourself to release unnecessary burdens from you and begin to grow from there. You know what I'm saying? And so this is why I'm taking the time, which I usually wouldn't go so far into quote celebrity conversation. The last time I did some of this nature was because it intrigued me. Like the case has to intrigue me for me to, because my research when I do it, I'll be like going all the way in. You know what I mean? It's like you're not done yet. No, you know, because I have to be satiated. I have to gather the data and then reflect on it. The last time I did something this intense, I think was Sandra Bland. Because that case also just intrigued me because like I said, I think there was so many missed opportunities in that space that now everybody's crying at the end of the matter. That's another thing. I saw somebody, and I'll leave it at this. I saw somebody said, why does the so-called Black community cover up for abuse, cover up for molestation and things of this nature? And in my estimation, there's a number of reasons. You have this trauma bond that has developed. You have this historical trauma of injustice. Okay, so of things not happening, of people not receiving justice, and that historical trauma of injustice leads to this thought of learned helplessness. What are they going to do anyway? No, we're never going to see justice. The person is just going to come out again and do it. So might as well not buck against the system, right? So when you're talking about this polarization of thoughts in the melanated community, if one cannot access mother and father, reading wisdom will disclose a lot. Just understand from this perspective can do wonders for personal growth. Yeah, if they're not accessible, as you said, wisdom, there's many principles within the Proverbs, within the Psalms, within biblical context. This is from biblical context. There's many principles there that can give you understanding. Wisdom is principle. Wisdom allows you, so what you can do if they're not there, if they're not present, is look at certain things within inside of yourself. Assess your patterns and behavior. I just modeled a possibility of how one can do that, right? So it's like if you put on the paper and you write out your earliest memory, right? And how it affected you, and you recall the feelings from that earliest memory, or if you were abused, or if you were happy, if you were glad, and you recall these earliest memories, you just gather them in and put them on the paper, write it out, manifest it, because when it is emotional, it's in the unseen realm. We only see how it manifests by our behaviors and our words. So what you do is you birth it. Okay, once you birth it, then you can analyze it, and you can see these, like I just showed in the R. Kelly narrative. You can see the reoccurring patterns and the connection between what happened and how I interpreted what happened and how I'm acting. Do you understand what I'm saying? So even if they're not there to tell you the fullness, you can, because you are the fruit that came from the tree, you can assess the fruit. It's like right now, they go into a cave in Egypt, and they found, and this is a true story, they found an ancient vessel and storage of seeds. They may not have the people, they may not have all these things, but they have these ancient seeds. You can analyze the seed. You know what I'm saying? You can analyze and be like, oh, okay, all right, okay. So you have to reverse engineer from where you are to kind of get an understanding about what you're about. And it takes a lot of work. Yeah, wisdom will cover every secret thing. Wisdom, and that's from trusting that the creator will, and then that's another place that we struggle in. The representation that many of our foreparents have given us about the creator and what it means to be in tune spiritually. There's a misrepresentation, and I hear that a lot in the narrative that even R. Kelly is telling him about himself. There's a misrepresentation of what it means to be in alignment. Like I said, for instance, this discussion, I didn't go and try to do anything. I just collected data, and I promise you, literally, it just dropped in my spirit. And I was like, whoa. And then I began to look it up. So when you align yourself with that which is right, when you align yourself, not trying to tap the wire, not trying to get a legal cable, not trying to bootleg Netflix, right? When you get in alignment, and that's what, for in my estimation, from my perspective, When I listen to a lot of what we as a people subscribe to, we think that church is a place that we arrive at, or there's another thought process that the individual is God, right? So it's, and where was God when this was happening? And where was God? And so there's this blame of humanity based on a narrative that we've been fed, that when things befall us, we should absorb ourselves to a certain degree and say, then God should have came in and did X, Y, and Z. Not realizing that when we step out of alignment, we open the door for things. So I like to explain it as simply as I can. When we run down our immune system physically, when we eat a lot of junk food, when we eat a lot of mucus producing foods, we lower our immune system. When you lower your immune system, you're more susceptible to what? Colds and sickness. It's a very plain, straightforward equation. Lack of exercise, bad diet, like the Americans, the SAD diet, standard American diet, okay? All of these things, stress, which also lowers the immune system, makes you susceptible to sickness, illness, and disease. Come over this side, right? We're going to jump over this side. So it is spiritually. When we come out of alignment, sorry, and I talk with my hands a lot, so if y'all see me bouncing, I talk with my hands a lot. When we come out of alignment spiritually, what we do is when we create certain thoughts in our head, when we feed on certain negative energy, okay, it lowers our spiritual immune system and it makes us more susceptible to attracting more negative energy. Yeah. So because oftentimes we have been told lies about the creator, about religion, about spirituality, today in this space and time, there's many people who said they're waking up and they are God, or they're this and that and all this kind of extracurricular stuff. But when you really look at the individual, it's the farce, okay? Because some of the same people who saying they're God, have acne. Like, does God have acne? You see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be funny. For those who have acne, there are many things that we can do, to help you clear the acne. But my point is that we are going so far to the left because we are rejecting what people have told us on the right. So a lot of these deviant behaviors come into our consciousness and come into our sphere from deviating from the program. Again, if we do something, everything, and this is what I found funny, and I don't know how I'm over here talking, but we're going to keep talking about it. And it's practical. When you get a car, there is a manual in the glove compartment of the car. This manual says, this is how you treat the car. This is what the air pressure should be. This is why you change the thing. When you see this light, it means this, it means that, it means this, it means that, all of these things. When we deviate from that, we enter into a space. Sometimes they say you outside of your warranty, or you enter into a space where it can cause problems with the car. Okay. Now we fight as human beings because we have a level of dualism inside of us already. We come to a certain degree with a virus on a computer, and it's our job to do the security scan. You know what I'm saying? We kind of come with it embedded in us. Now there's a whole theory about how that happens, but the reality is, in the here and now, there is a constant battle and struggle to do that which is right. And until we get a hold of that, until we're able to master that, it's not something that you can be like, I mastered today and tomorrow, because tomorrow another test will manifest in another way. But when someone is not showed the ways in which to master that and govern that and rein it in, then like rough waters, it just takes you away. And that's where a lot of people are stuck in this dark space where you're disconnected from source, you're disconnected from the creator, and you don't know how to get back. And this is where we see the darkness in people's eyes. This is where we begin to see all the things where you see this talk of allegations or truth of priests in priestly spaces abusing people, exploiting people sexually. You understand what I'm saying? Little boys, and mostly little boys in the, you see what I'm saying? So you're like, wow, why such deviant behavior? Because when man becomes their own God, back to idolatry, there's a space in man where they think they're their own God. And since you're your own God, then you can make your own rules. When you make your own rules, then anything goes. And so when you have all of these gods working around, there's no one rule. You know what I mean? Everybody makes up rules. You can wear shoes in my house. You can't wear my shoes in my house. You can sit on my bed. You can't sit on my bed. You understand what I'm saying? And it's a slippery slope. But I'm going to read a little bit and then I'm going to wind down. Wisdom uncovers every secret thing. Oh, I read that. Thank you, Susan. Not apocryphal. I've been torn as of late of what part of the Bible to digest. I was raised in the church. However, my love for history unveiled the nefarious use of the Bible towards our people. I'm a believer and spiritual. However, I always want the truth. That's powerful. And the truth is something that it takes time. Like you said, it takes time to digest and understand. And I can share from my experience. It's something that it's a walk. It's a way of life, because there has been so much corruption that to get to this purity, to get to this space, it's work. And some people get to a place of complacency where it's like, okay, I found out that that's a lie, but I don't want to give up this. I don't want to give up congregation. I don't want to give up fellowship. I don't want to give up all these things. And so I'm just going to accept these things, although they make me uneasy inside, right? And so this walk of search for truth is not for the faint. So may we all be encouraged and start with us. You know what I'm saying? So that it's pure when it goes out. Because if we don't work to clean our vessel, if we don't work to get in touch with the things that are wrong within us, and if we don't purge that space out, then we're going to corrupt the truth. And this is why you see a lot of church leaders and all of these people get this power, because that's what truth has the ability to empower someone. And when they get this power, they lord it over people because the vessel is unclean. And so we internalize it and they say, well, I got power over these jokers, and they become God. And why? The people elevate them in their minds. This is how somebody becomes a God in somebody's mind, is because you allow them to stand up on this platform in your mind. Don't do it. I'm going to tell you what my parents told me. There ain't no, and I was young. There's no superhero. I got to do the Jamaican on you. There's no superhero. There's no idol. Like from the gate. Don't bring it. Don't be putting no posters up on your wall. This is what we got as children. Don't idolize anybody. Don't highly esteem them. Like put them up there in your sight, because then you're going to compromise. You're going to sacrifice yourself again for this individual. But we live in a culture that has a show called American Idol. We live in a culture that has a process of making stars because they understand the spirituality of elevating somebody in your eyesight and what that will cause you to do spiritually. I don't know how I got over there, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it all back. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're learned behavior patterns. I guess we can go ahead and put it in a nice bow. And this is a learned behavior pattern. We must be aware of this. We must understand that it is dangerous and problematic. You respect people and one another for the things that they are bringing to the table, but we all have pieces that we're bringing to the table. We don't own the table. You know what I'm saying? Because this soul is in this body temporarily. It's here temporarily. And that's another thing that is out of sight for us. Sometimes we get caught into that rut. We get caught into this dark space. We get caught into thinking that this is all this is, not realizing that this is your opportunity on the controller. You ever been in a house full of children and you only got 2 controllers? That's back in the day when we used to play Nintendo. And there's only 2 controllers. So you can sit there watching other people play, you know what I mean, and doing this, hoping they jump. And then finally, boom, the controller frees up and it's your turn. When you incarnate in the flesh, that's your opportunity to hold the controller. This is your chance. You see what I'm saying? The spiritual realm is on this side, and there are souls who have the opportunity to incarnate, and you're one of them. The flesh is your controller. And just like when you first start playing that video game, you're like, oh, chill, that button jumps. Okay, this means go forward. When you ever seen a baby, I've said this before, when the baby is laying on his back, I love looking at little babies. The baby, when you look into the eyes of a newborn baby, they be looking like, okay. And they looking at their hands like, okay. You know what I'm saying? And they start testing and finding their voice to see like, whoa, okay, wow. And they do things and we're like, and then we begin to mold them. We begin to this learned behavior, right? We begin to say, well, don't put your toe in your mouth. And this is what you do with that. Just like a video game, the book or the person who knows better is like, this is how you jump. This is how you shoot them. This is how you jump on the back. And that's what you do to a child. Now the child learns to control its controller, its body. So we're taught, then the child innately begins to get up and walk, and you assist it, but the child begins to walk, and the child takes up to 2 years to fully begin to, not even fully, to want to, it internalize, it absorb this environment for these 2 years before it speaks. And then we're surprised when the child first speaks. We're like, whoa, what did you just say? Because the child has been absorbing all of this data, and then now it's like, okay, I'm ready to play now. And then as you continue to grow, you're getting a better control over your vehicle, which is your body. But what we don't have a lot of information on, when we are not taught readily, is how to govern the spirit. Because if you look into the eyes of a newborn, you can see that soul. You can see what type of temperament, if you're paying attention, you could see what type of temperament, what kind of soul it is just by the actions, the movements. And then if you are paying attention, you will know which ways to guide that soul, which ways to, because not every soul needs the same thing. Some souls are just cool, laid back. I'm not in a rush. Everything is good. And others are like, I gotta move, I gotta move. You see what I'm saying? And so again, when we get grown and we think it's just about eat, sleep, go to school, we're missing it. When you come out of school and you're in your job and you're miserable and you feel unfulfilled, that's because you finally got a chance to play and you wasting it. You over there eating popcorn. I'm eating popcorn. You're wasting your opportunity to manifest. And what is this about? I could tell you what I think it's about, but what do you think that you got this opportunity for? In your minds. The church, I don't know. Can the church say amen? Okay, amen, church. The church said amen. Why do we get this opportunity? What is it for? When you're playing a video game, it may be to, and I'm dated, so please mind me because I don't play video games now, but back in the day, when you get the controller, you're trying to get Super Mario and Luigi to the princess in the castle. Right? You remember that, right? You're trying to get Super Mario, whether you got to jump over stompers, you got to jump on Yoshi's back. You're trying to get Super Mario and Luigi to the castle. That's the video game. Street Fighter, you trying to get to, that's dated. Ain't no one a Street Fighter. You yo kicking so that you can get to the fighter that you want. So what is the end game? Why have you incarnated? What is this about? Because without the end game, then every wind that blows, you're going to be there. So every opportunity that we see to understand something so that we can use it, because what good is something that you can't use? That's called a hoarder. You have everything in your house. You have all of these gadgets. You have all of these clothes. You have all of these things, and you can't use it. You don't use it. You have no desire to use it. Correct. Could it be to plug into higher power, becoming your best spiritual self while inspiring others? It pretty much. It's to reconnect to source, to the creator, so that you can do what it is that you were designed to do. Everybody, it's like every flower wasn't designed to bloom the same way. They're all flowers. Every fruit tree was designed to bear fruit, but not in the same way. So whatever is in your vessel, whatever is in your assignment sheet, when you reconnect, then what's going to happen is you're going to get the download that you need to do your job. And one of it is to choose, is a choice. Like I said, we're battling continually. It's a choose to walk on a certain path. We can choose not to. We can choose to subscribe to what people will say our lower nature, and then it will lead us into these dark spaces. Essentially, and I'll leave you with this. It's either pay now or pay later. You know what I'm saying? You can do stuff on credit. That's following the ego. The ego is like, yo, forget that. You know what I mean? You want that, get that. It feels good. And you get the stuff on credit and you're going to pay later. Or you put that work in and then you will experience that what you need to experience in the long term. It's an investment versus an impulse buy. And every day we're forced with this thought. Do I invest time and energy to bettering myself and my environment and my community? Or do I just go for impulse and I'll deal with it later? We're faced with this every day. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like I said, if you missed the video yesterday, not yesterday, a few days ago, about the hypothesis of R. Kelly's possible brain damage and the reason why I conclude that that one specialist might just be right, go ahead and click the video. Let me know your comments below. Share it, and let's continue to have this discussion. All right? So everybody have a blessed night. And this is what happens when I freestyle, y'all. This is why I be putting, when I freestyle, I be like, the thoughts be like, and then we come back to this moment. So everybody have a blessed night. One.